system is kind of good.
Okay, we can start now. Thank you.
Okay. How do we even begin? Who is the host? Who is the guest? Or are we just having the conversation? I don't know. All right. I think we should begin. We're talking about unemployment. We have like 51 minutes to talk about it. And I know it's good enough time. And thank you, EI, for bringing this together. I mean, you brought the data people to this call. I mean, with Steers, with Tokunbo, great work you guys are doing with Preston and everyone in there. I mean, amazing work. We appreciate that work, and we believe that it's really, really necessary for the ecosystem that we have more people who are bringing fact-based analysis and narratives in space. So I'm really glad we're doing this. I would just think we should just give I would just give like a 5-minute intro about what I see in the report, or what are the trends of things. So this is not immune. Nigeria is not immune to the current state of pandemic. Even in the US, with all its economic dynamism, as one of the highest number of unemployment rates right now, almost like in 45 decades. And it's just because of the shock from the pandemic, and others collapsed. Most businesses are not even prepared anymore for a very digital world. Cinemas, bars, offices closed down for months. I knew that Nigeria was not immune from that. So technically, we were also going to be in that space. But when I look at this report, I feel like, yes, we also are not a serious country. So I will start with something. So if you look at the Fed, the US Fed, and if you ask the US Fed, well, what exactly is the purpose of the US Fed? The US Fed will say the purpose of US Fed is for zero unemployment. Just keep everybody working. And that's why the job report in America, it's taken as a canticle of faith. Everybody waits for the job report. In fact, it's somehow the rough estimate, or I won't say estimate, but is what you used to even judge the performance of the president. I mean, to say, oh, Trump has added 4,000 jobs or 400,000 jobs or 500,000 jobs. But if you look at Nigeria, I mean, if you ask the CBN, what exactly is the focus of the CBN will say is price stability, which means that we are looking at the inflation, we're trying to get single rate inflation. And I'm always asking myself, are we always going to eat inflation? I mean, inflation has refused to come down just because there are factors that are beyond us, and it has to be productivity and the rest like that. So firstly, I feel that it's an anomaly for you to have a report in Q3 2018, and suddenly you leave 6 quarters, You come in Q2 2020, and you now say this is your new report. I feel like it just means that we're not measuring what matters. But we've been very, very up to date, very, very prompt with the inflation numbers. And we've done that on a monthly basis. That's something we've always done. And the inflation numbers that we will see on the CBN that is done by the MBA is funded by the CBN. So the only reason why we've gotten that right on time is just because someone has provided support for the MBA. So that's my first thing about this report. We are not measuring what matters, and the 6 month gap in the non-employment report does not even mean that we have not put an humane element to the way we're doing governance. Secondly, as you look at it, is now start diving into the report itself, and one of the things that shocked me, in a way, is to look at how it seems even education is not making a difference in terms of how people get employed. What exactly you were able to expect is when you're able to get a higher level of education, you should be able to be much more open and much more fit for the employment space. But it also shows that within the formal systems of work, the opportunities are severely closing down. And that worries me. The fact that people in rural areas are less employed than urban areas, that's well known and well defined for years. But what worries me also is about that a lot of, with the formal space, is not even assimilating a lot. And it's just because, like I said, we've been a grossly unproductive space for years. And if you look at the GDP report, the saving grace that we've had in that GDP report has been the ICT sector. Maybe to some extent, and because that's the only sector that has a huge percentage. In terms of it's 30% of the GDP, and that's what is growing. The other agriculture grew by, I think, 1.something%. Real estate is a negative. If you look at your oil, or even the oil production is a negative. So agriculture, that part of it. So I'm asking myself, beyond the ICT space and the digital technologies that underpin that, that's been the only sector we have activated that has had a huge element, a huge drive on our GDP numbers. And we hope to have a lot of direct and indirect jobs in there for that place. But we have not expanded every other space as much as we should. The agriculture we have, has not come into it. We are in the pandemic. We are in the rainy season. So if there's any time where food was really much more necessary, and we've seen Amazon declare. Most food essential item companies, just went on record gains within this whole pandemic, because it now became a question of survival rather than luxury. But if our agricultural space, with all the whole ideas and all of that space, is not even growing, the ICT sector is the only thing that's expanded anything much more. So it's about what I call the growth levels. Beyond what we have done with the ICT sector between 2000 and up till date, we have not really found another growth level to activate to be able to come a huge opportunity for people to either get gainfully employed or to even able to have a lot of much more economic opportunity. And I guess that we might look at unemployment as a statistic, but it's just a product of that. We have not just been growing enough to be able to put people to work. So I will stop at that point and I'll let Tokunbo take it. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Seun, for that. I'll start off with an agreement about the Nigerian government not being serious. To have waited for almost 2 years for unemployment results is unheard of. It's not something that I've come across in many other countries before, obviously not including the very, very poor ones. It just goes to show that governance is done, blindly a lot. The Nigerian government did not really know where unemployment was, to be able to pull any levers to try and deal with the problem. So the data issue is a scary one, but at least we have something now. Unfortunately, we currently don't have, the numbers between the third quarter of 2018 and now. And the first quarter of 2020. So we can't even tell what the impact of COVID was per se, but hopefully the MBS would provide some historical data at some point to cover that gap, because for us to have a gap of 1 year in our statistics, unemployment isn't just good enough. In terms of the unemployment numbers, I mean, nothing shocking, happened there. It was around what people were expecting. The truth of the matter and the fact of the matter that we have, millions of unemployed people in Nigeria. And I mean, the question is, how do we deal with that? And it's very nice to think of, you see the government releasing, different policies, making XY, 700,000 jobs in particular schemes, that only last 6 months and such. But at the end of the day, the only real sustainable way to create jobs is by growing your economy. There has to be a demand for the jobs. You can't just create, be it fake jobs, say, okay, you want to quickly employ people for 3 months, and the government is doing one of these policies at the moment. It just wouldn't work. What happens when the period is over? We saw, and it's something that really highlights Nigeria's problem with how growth and unemployment are linked, is the ShopRite story. ShopRite left, or at least divested its investments from Nigeria around 3 or 4 weeks ago now. And ShopRite as a company employs around 150,000 people in South Africa. It has over around 2,000 stores. Its plan, ShopRite's plan, was to have the same amount of stores that it has in South Africa in Nigeria as well. It wanted to reach at least 800 stores. It only reached around 30. And it only employed around 2,000 people in Nigeria. Whereas in South Africa, it employs 150,000 people. And that was ShopRite's plan. But most of you would have seen the story, due to Forex, due to Papa, trying to get goods into basically, long story short, doing business in Nigeria was too difficult for ShopRite. And so the opportunity to create 150,000 jobs through one establishment, Nigeria basically, threw that away. And that is where, the job creation comes from, when there's an actual demand for it, where the private sector is creating those jobs, because the government can't do it itself, right? We can say, okay, government should, do this policy here, do that policy there, but if the economy doesn't require those jobs, they will disappear. And one thing, the government can do in terms of, boosting jobs is creating an environment where the private sector can create those jobs. But the government does have a role to play. I'll quickly talk about education. I think Nigeria is in a place where it has to take shortcuts. I don't think we are in a place where we can continue to go through the normal education system we have here, where we teach people, you do the whole of primary school, secondary school, and then you come out after university and you're struggling to get a job. Employers are complaining that the skills that these graduates come out with are not necessarily what they are looking for in terms of employment. The jobs available and the demand and demand for jobs, there's no match between the two. That's why you have an employment figure telling you that you're more likely to be unemployed if you're a graduate than if you have a primary school certificate. Because as a graduate, the jobs available there, they're just not an option for many people. So we need to find a way to take shortcuts with our education system. For example, think of a typical software engineer or developer who takes 2 to 3 years to learn how to code, right? Getting a job as a software engineer, be it from a company from abroad or even in Nigeria, is not going to be a difficult showing, right? So there is one potential route where Nigeria finds a particular niche and does specific education and training just focused on the end goal. So you are just going to study this so that you can get a job in this sector, or so you can learn this particular skill. This is something that the Scandinavian countries do very well. You can't just go to school for 10, 11 years plus and nothing comes out of it. So I think that's a place where the government has to really refocus and engineer how it does its education and matches that to jobs. Because at the moment, Nigeria cannot afford to have its kids going through 15 years of school to come out with nothing. It needs to make sure that the skills they come out with are directly aligned with the jobs that are available. And even if those jobs are external, so it's not going to be Nigerian companies employing them, that's fine. That's something India did with its ICT sector. So there are opportunities for Nigeria to think about ways to take those type of shortcuts. Otherwise, it's going to be a very difficult next few years as we continue to grow at the rate at which we're growing. So yeah, I don't know if Sharon has any thoughts on that.
You made a very strong point, and I think growth, like without, so first thing I see, we have to first increase growth. How do we grow? And growing is something that you have to systematically think through about, first understanding the structure of your economy. So it's not just about saying, if you look at, let me pull up some of the data. I mean, we did one infographic recently where we looked at the top 80, the 80%, and the 6 sectors that make 80% of Nigeria's economy. And we're trying to ask ourselves that without you not investing or paying attention to those 6 sectors, you're practically not going to say you are growing. And these are the sectors. Agriculture, almost 90% of agriculture is crop production. Then you have telecoms and IT. Then you have trade. Then you have petroleum. Then you have real estate. Then you have food, beverage, and tobacco. Then you have financial institutions. Then you have construction, and you have professional, scientific, and technical services. Now, if you say you want to grow, you want to grow the economy, it's really clear that until you grow agriculture, in fact, if agriculture is 21 or 22% or 23% sometimes of your GDP, until you grow agriculture in the 5-6%, or you put in the 5-6% leap, you can't say that you are growing the economy. You are not going to grow the economy at 6 to 7%. Because even ICT is growing at 14, ICT grew at 13%, and it cannot even still lift because of the negative growth you had on trade and on real estate. And you have also on construction. You cannot even say you have grown the economy. So in a way, so first construct GDP structure of Nigeria, and to be able to even first ask ourselves, how do we take agriculture to 7% growth in our GDP? And if we're going to take agriculture to 7% growth in our GDP, definitely it can't be the rain-fed agriculture that we have at the subsistence level. It can't be dividing lots into 2 acres or 1 acre. We have to mechanize agriculture. We have to also think about the entire value chain of agriculture: storage, packaging, export grade quality. And if you're going to be able to do that, I mean, do you create a single window for agricultural export? Are you going to do some work around standardization? How are you going to even do evacuation mechanisms? I mean, the rural routes and everything. What about mechanization? What are the chances of getting access to tractors? How much tractor per capital do you need within our environment? You have to also have to understand that the more you mechanize, the less you can get more people into agriculture, because I mean, a mechanized system does not need many people running it. I mean, in like places like Iowa in the US, you drive 2 kilometers and possibly just belongs to just 2 people, and they're just driving the tractors day and night. So in a way, agriculture is not, and we have to be honest about ourselves, it's not going to give us that leap on the employment side. Even if we agreed, even if it's employing so many people, it's either underemploying them, one, or it's even not giving them enough. And that's why when the poverty and inequality report came out by MBS, it was clear that the more people, the less education the head of the household was, and if the person was involved in agriculture, the tendency that you are going to be poor gets much more higher. So if we're thinking that the agriculture in rural areas is going to make people much more richer, we are lying to ourselves. So the kind of agriculture that will first take us to 6-7% growth would be mechanized, and it's not going to be labor intensive. So it's something that we even have to take our minds off agriculture. How do we move people who are doing, how do we, and I always hear this idea of, we need to create a replacement generation for agriculture. I also had that belief in my head at the point, but I think I'm losing that. I'm thinking that maybe I want to say, I want you. No, it's not going to happen. We can be in the value chain, but not just like the whole primary production element of it needs much more people. What we need at that level is just more mechanization. And I think the second thing that has to do much more is, if we're going to think about employment, we have to think about digitalization of services. And because that itself has proven that when you digitalize services, you can notch your GDP a little bit higher, and also you won't be able to capture value much more effectively. And I was reading the news like a few minutes ago about how Ekiti state government is now trying to digitize the Okada riders within the state. So maybe as an Okada rider, you're supposed to charge 50 naira for a trip. But because you in your head, the distances are of the same length. So it's okay. Anything from A to B is just 15 naira. But by the time you digitize it, you can make an extra gain, or even be able to properly price things, in some sort of way. So it can be helpful that we think about what the ICT sector has done for us. The third part is, and which is what it comes back to you, which is the point you were making around education. We need to think our education on two hands. The technical part of our education that's seriously lacked over the years. So, I mean, you're trying to get tiles made, you're looking for Beninois people, for Ghanaians. You can't even say, we can't, I mean, in the 60s, in the 50s, we had CITIL and Guild certificate, and the UK still practices that today. There's a vocational mechanism to say, I have a certification for plumbing, and that's standardized. And so, and I'm looking for the best plumbers, and I know that this is where I can get the right plumber. Guess the rating is there, the kind of work ethic I expect that he or she should have, and that's how you even effectively price for it. I mean, I'm currently in the US, and almost everything I have to buy, I have to learn how to do it by myself, because for you to say, I'm going to get someone to even hang pictures on the wall or hang posters on the wall, it costs so much. I mean, and it's just, it might cost so much for me as a Nigerian. It's just because there's dignity in labor, there's a proper pricing because of how professional that guy is supposed to do his own work. So making the technical components of our education, and also those who work in those informal spaces, making them professionalizing that space is in a way we're going to get more people on board and get much more the income level to go much more higher. And the final point is also now the kind of education we have within our universities. Someone is interrupting now. The kind of education that we have within our universities, and I'm getting worried that the level of education there is never going to explore entrepreneurship. It's not going to even help us to be competitive at the services end, because it's very, very clear now that if there's any place we're going to move a bit forward, it's going to be in the services in the short term. The right passage for us should have been for us to move from agriculture to industries and to services. But the truth is that the industry component is severely weak just because of a huge infrastructure gap. Either it's power, either it's a port system that doesn't work, or even the red tape of government or the bureaucracy around government itself. So we can't even get industry to work. So if there's any place where we've shown tremendous growth, I mean, it would be the service, either financial services, either insurance or wherever. There has to be a way for us to be able to propose, the Nigerian graduate or the Nigerian graduate to be able to fit into the services component. Either it's going to be lawyers, or going to be auditors, or going to be accountants, but we have to be in a way that the education we are going to have, because if we keep saying, I mean, it's just, keep producing more engineers. I mean, what exactly are those engineers going to do? We don't have enough industries to bring in engineers, and we don't have even the industry, we can't even produce competitive at that level. So in my head is, I would say one, mechanize agriculture. If you're going to be able to increase employment, mechanize agriculture, show to people that beyond, let us, win people off that primary space of agriculture and that mentality that as long as we keep doing more agricultural schemes, as you call it in quotes in Nigeria, we're going to get more people involved. No, we're going to mechanize agriculture, and we're going to pay more attention on the extended value chains for agriculture. That's one. Two, on the vocational side, we're going to do much work to professionalize that space so that more people can get in, and because they see that the income level in that space is rising. And thirdly is to think through how do we propose graduates for entrepreneurship and also to be able to be fit in the services sector. It could be, fit in the service sector is, I'm just talking about proper use of a spreadsheet. Proper use of just good writing. Articulation, and be able to contextualize issues. And those are the kind of things I feel that we need much more for my end. Let me allow you to go to Tokunbo here.
Yeah, you made very, very good points there. And you mentioned something that stuck with me is how you talked about, the cost of doing something as small as getting someone to hang up a picture in the US. And it's the same for many other developed countries. And it highlights that Nigeria really does have a lot of cheap labor, right? Getting your hair cut or getting someone to make a table for you or hang something up can be done with a few hundred naira. And that's what you have no choice at the moment but to use that to our advantage. An economy grows either by its people or by the capital or infrastructure that it has. At the end of the day, when you look at all countries around the world, all they have are people and infrastructure. It is how they use it that determines how they grow. No country has anything more special than that. And Nigeria, with its people, unfortunately, we have millions of illiterate people in the country. And whilst we would like to try and shift into other sectors like services, at the same time we also have to make sure that those in sustenance farming were able to move them up a level within agriculture still, because I think it'd be very difficult for the government to take something like I think the last max employment numbers I saw from 2017 had something like 50% of workers in agriculture, right? It's going to be very difficult for the government to move that volume of millions of people anywhere else at the moment. It's going to be a very gradual process. But for them, I think the policy there should be to start that increasing of productivity of the work they're doing. And at the end of the day, for Nigeria as a whole, it has to really come down to what is the demand. What does anyone want? We can say we're going to do agriculture, but who's going to purchase, the agricultural goods that we're going to create? I've seen some stories about agricultural exports to some countries getting, some goods are doing well, like sesame seeds, while others, see problems like, low quality. Trying to compete globally in agriculture is very difficult. The likes of the US and the EU spend billions of dollars, subsidizing their own agricultural sectors. And so, again, it really comes back to what does the world want? And Nigeria has cheap labor. What can we provide to the world that's cheaper than what everybody else can? And it's the people. So what skills can we train them to help them do? And I think that's, again, I'm going to go back to what India did. And I think slowly and progressively, if we're not going towards that end, we will be left behind. I don't think, you can't create a country with, rich individuals through just agriculture. Agriculture is not going to get poverty out of the way. You can't, agriculture is not a sector where, that we can see the amount of incomes that we need for people to be able to buy cars and go to ShopRite even. ShopRite, one of the reasons why ShopRite left, there was no purchasing power from any from many Nigerians to purchase any goods and services. And agriculture is just going to be not enough to get us there. And so, again, it comes back to what Sharon said about, technical skills. Go to universities. We talk about agriculture a lot. The government talks about agriculture a lot. You go to universities, and who in the university is studying, anything related to agriculture? A very small percentage of people are doing that. So why are people studying something else? And you're here saying, the sector to push is agriculture. Meanwhile, you're not teaching people how to use that sector to its best ability. There's just a mismatch between what the government is trying to do and what graduates and people who are learning any skills are trying to do. And so that if that mismatch is not connected, then we're going to continue seeing situations where people graduate and there are no jobs. Of course, there are no jobs when the government is pushing all of these efforts towards agriculture. So as a graduate, it's your choice. Do you want to keep looking for a law job, or do you then have to go to agriculture? And then it's a case of, well, I spent all these years learning about law and whatnot. Why would I go and study agriculture? So if instead that person had learned more high-skilled type agriculture, dealing with the machines like you mentioned, then that's even a better possibility for said person. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, it has to be a mix of both within agriculture, the people who are still there, the millions of people who are still there, increasing their productivity. And the government is doing stuff like fertilizers and the likes. It has to be making them more productive so that all the hours they are spending, actually turns into income. Productivity is equal to wages. Like that's just it, right? So you can be putting so much output and output and output, but if you're not productive, over time your wages are not going to rise. And so that has to be, for now, unfortunately, the tactic in the agricultural sector, because there are just so many people there that for now we just have to look at how can we make it more productive, while at the same time trying to maneuver into something that we can sell to the world. We have all these people. What labor can we do cheaper than any other country that we can sell? We can offer our services to, be it call centers. If it's call centers, like I said, India took that route and it worked very well for them. Hiring someone to do, with the pandemic now, we've seen how it doesn't really matter where you are, you can still work, right? So even if it's accounting services that all Nigerians start to do for corporations in the US or in the UK or any developed countries, that's possible, right? We can do accounts for people from here, but you just have to make sure that you're actually training people to do that. So there needs to be a strategy, right? We can offer those services more cheaper than any most other countries outside of Africa. So that just has to be our thinking. What's the demand? What do people want? We can do it cheaper. Let's focus on that. And I think, again, that last point on what the pandemic has shown about location is something that we can start to use to our advantage.
I mean, maybe I'll do it one more round, then we can ask if you have questions. And then I think you made that point clearly. It's just about what we can offer cheaply, because we are locked in a very competitive space. But we can take that. We have to ask ourselves. I mean, and like I said, the industry space might be is a place where we right now, because of the factors, we don't have enough competitiveness is weak in that space. So if there's any place we can leverage much more, it's either in agriculture, and it's either in an agriculture at the scale, at the mechanized scale, or is it expand the value chain, also services. Those are two things in my head. The other thing, again, I'll take 3 points. One has to do with, and I've always said about it, we can think, we have two choices. I mean, in terms of how we think to trade. So we can think trade in terms of doing import substitution or even doing export growth. And I think this approach of us trying to push imports, and I don't think it's an all or nothing, because if there's any lesson we have learned from this pandemic, is that a little bit of import substitution is not bad. Just imagine the US, waiting for the consignment for face masks and PPE materials from China. And France, they hijacked one of the consignments that was meant for France on the tarmac, in China, just the intense energy that all that needed. I mean, I was in the US all through the, paper towels ran out of stores, sanitizers, you can't even find that, disinfecting wipes. Even till now, disinfecting wipes, they are yet to recover, the inventory level is still yet to, the demand, you can't even meet that demand. And it's just because, like, I'm in that mode of where a country has to think through what can be of national security or national emergency. And that means we have to find a way to protect that and become not too vulnerable on the outside world. But in most things, I believe that you need to think through about what are you going to actually sell to the world. And the fundamental problem in Nigeria, either with exchange rate not being stable, or either with public revenues not being enough, or either with unemployment, not taking attention to unemployment. It's just because we have a gross addiction into oil revenues and to oil sector. And I wrote an article on Steers, I think 2 years ago, about Nigeria's opportunity to export as Nigeria's opportunity to grow, which means, and it was just a sample, research. I went to Gap store in the US. I wanted to buy clothes for my daughter, my 2 daughters. And I took all the Gap stores, and each of them I was checking, made in Bangladesh, made in Laos, made in Myanmar, made in Indonesia, made in Malaysia, made in India, made in China, made in Vietnam. the entire Southeast Asia corridor, made in Thailand, has taken in the whole fabric and the whole garment industry, and have made it their own. And there's a tough competitiveness going up in that place, And the same thing, we have Aba, we have all that space, and I'm going to ask myself, we have not been able to propose ourselves to ask ourselves that question constantly: where exactly are we going to sell to the world? So until we're able to we have too many people doing nothing, and they are not connected in any way to the global trade. And as much as we think that we can propose them for internal consumption, it will never be enough. It's just like you are trying to you have a group of poor people in a small community just circulating, just round tripping capital around. It's never been a work. And that's why you see a whole lot of communities in Nigeria, when a tertiary institution is built in there, the income level just goes up because capital importation comes in play. Once Nigeria is able to think through how do you bring capital importation for FDI, capital importation that is enhancing exports, we can't still even tackle unemployment in a very significant way. We need people. In Kenya, the whole pandemic really crumbled their flour market for almost 3 or 4 months. And that's like a $1.5 billion market in Kenya. Most of the flours in Europe, in the UK, and in the US, they're all sourced from within that region. And it's not that we don't have tropical regions, wherever we have in Taraba, we have in Plateau, that can also grow flowers. Yes, we can grow flowers, but are we structured an export mechanism to provide a cold room, or to be able to even not stay on 2 weeks waiting on Apapa to be able to offload? Are we thought through those kind of mechanisms to be able to adopt? So if you have people cutting flowers in China, in Kenya, they're employed in some sort of way. They might not get the kind of income that's great, but in some sort of way they're putting in the work and they're doing so much work. So becoming a country that thinks about exports and ask yourself, what do we sell? What do we sell to the world in a competitive manner is one form. Secondly, is the diaspora market. There's so much opportunity that we can still tap on with the diaspora. And I'm looking at services like the nostalgia of things you miss in Nigeria. Food, for example. There's a huge economy around all of that. People being packaging rice, gari. There's no food that anyone eats in Nigeria that I don't eat in the US. If it's cassava flour, it's there. If it's lafun, is there. If it's anything you could imagine, Yuru is there. Locust, every single thing is sold in the African store, and there's a huge economy around that. And I just wish that we're able to not just do this, maybe just in where you have large concentration of Nigerians, like Washington, Maryland area, but just across the world. I'm able to be in Georgia, I'm able to be everywhere in the world, and that becomes a norm. And I feel that there's an opportunity for us to tap into the capital, the diaspora capital. Thirdly, in my head is construction. I was the day I went to Chicago. That was my first time in Chicago, and I was shocked with the level of number of buildings. I've been to New York. Skyscrapers everywhere, tall buildings everywhere. And now in Chicago again, when did this whole place get built? And I feel like if there's anything that people like China did or Dubai did, was extreme attention to the construction industry. And we can't, and I don't think we have the cement, we have the bitumen, we have the gravel to do all of that work. So if it's about us putting capital in the hands of people who activate that more effectively, yes, we should. But we have to be a country that builds things. And I'm talking about just building for building's sake, building roads for building roads' sake. Constantly putting people to work to just build things. Because you look at all the Shenzhen region, you're going to ask yourself, these are a lot of skyscrapers, but they build things with the anticipation that when we build them, people would come. Businesses will come, opportunities will come. And then I go to Ibadan and I look at, what's the last time a skyscraper was put in Ibadan? Maybe it was a Cocoa House in the 60s. We just stopped building things. We just stopped investing in infrastructure and construction. And that's why you see in the pandemic period, in a country as ours, as a developing country, we had construction, go into negative growth territory, becomes that volatile. And because construction in Nigeria has been more targeted around, public sector, so public sector investment. It's also time for us to start thinking through, what do we build? What does the private sector build for Nigeria that is in a way competitive? If I'm going to license someone to build a Lagos Abuja rail network, the same way you have an Amtrak, yes, we're going to go ahead and put people to work in that space. So that's, for me, something that we have to deliberately think about. It could be a mechanism, the CBN is thinking through that way, saying they're going to create an infrastructure bank or something. But it could be a mechanism that doesn't carry a huge external obligation on us. But in a way, we have to find a way to continuously build and put people to work.
Okay, I think we'll stop there and check if you have any questions. I'm not sure.
Well, you want to have a round, maybe we can take question and answer, you have another final comment?
Yeah, I was going to see if you had any questions. Otherwise, I guess we can round it up. Trying to check the chat. Okay. Okay. I guess to end it all, I guess at the end of the day, it's going to be difficult for the government to do much. The money is tight for them, for the government. Nigeria's government is not a large one, and to do anything substantial without borrowing is going to be very difficult for them. And it's a case of China was able to do what it did because it was very, very, discipline when it comes to savings. Savings via private individuals, savings via businesses, savings via government. Savings was the thing that allowed China to really boost its infrastructure programs. And I think Nigeria should definitely take that route because it's almost like a win-win situation. If we start to really borrow money and focus on building roads and building better infrastructure in the power sector, and even if it's the oil sector as well, just boosting our infrastructure, that would then in turn start to attract and improve how business is done in Nigeria, and then come back to impact the economy through more employment. If you improve Apapa, for example, with better infrastructure, a company like ShopRite stays in Nigeria, right? And then they're able to employ more people through that route. So I think infrastructure is definitely something that cannot be ignored in terms of this whole unemployment situation. I guess the question is, where does the money come from to do those infrastructure projects? And for now, it seems like it's borrowing or nothing. All revenues can only do so much for Nigeria. And the way things are looking now with fossil fuels, I would not be comfortable banking on oil to be the revenue drive for Nigeria's infrastructure projects. And there's talk about taxing or improving our tax collection. But then again, how do you increase taxes on a population that 40% of people are poor? So it's really down to, how do we get those funds? Borrowing being one option, bringing in the private sector to help do those infrastructure projects that can really give us those quick wins. For example, just focusing on power can unlock a lot. If we just solve the power problem, that can unlock and improve business environment that can then start to create jobs. So it's those small, not small, but those focused areas that can give you a bigger win, more bang for your buck that Nigeria should focus on because of our tight constraints when it comes to money. So yeah, I think I'll end on that note. Sure, are you muted?
In this for me, we need to take people serious, lives much more serious in Nigeria. Like I said, I mean, the difference between Fed Reserve and CBN, we need to focus also about, I mean, the purpose of the Fed is to have total employment in the US economy. That's like that's the motto. I mean, that's like what they focus on every time. And it's also important for us to do these things. These things also will not be done in an election cycle or within a governance, within an administration. So Nigeria really suffers a lot from short-termism. I mean, no one is thinking 6 years, 10 years to say we're going to be able to unlock this sector in 3 or 4 years. So you even find that more of the opportunities we gained was just us, which was either on the energies of young people or entrepreneurs, being able to show the way to government for the right. I mean, the whole fintech thing was happening, and the government was even trying to do a catch-up. So in a way, the government needs to step out and think clearly about, we need to put employment of people as in a very, very important, significant, as a very important element. The second thing also is to think through around how are we going to increase skill level within the Nigerian space. So even if we know that we can put people to job, where are the opportunities to really reskill people? There was a time the government had this initiative, I think it was under Jonathan, where people were being attached to corporate organizations and the government was responsible for their payment and things like that. So you also have to think about how do you skill people or put people through an internship mechanism so that you are able to improve their skill level and capacity and be able to be available for work. And I think and digitization of services as much as possible, a kind of digitization that doesn't breed exclusion or exploitation, because that could also be very dangerous, but in a way, being able to bring people also to the formal economy so that we can also do appropriate pricing. That's for me the way I would see what the government needs to do. And liberation of capital. When we look at Nigeria, everything feels so small. Even the stock exchange size is small. I mean, using some of the articles from your end, the stock exchange market for Nigeria is incredibly, when you compare that with the JSE, which is even the closest event, that's, I mean, we can't even scratch 10% of the size of that exchange. So, and if you take Dangote out from that exchange, I mean, it's all dust. So how do you put capital more into the hands of those who can do the work? And how do you liberate that kind of capital? Something that the government also has, something that the whole environment even has to think through. Because we get a whole lot of things wrong, just because we feel that the government has to step in place. But what we need much more is more capital in the hands of people that are willing to take the risk and to go all the way. So, I mean, that's where I think we should put an end to all of this, but we've dropped too many gems, and I wish this can get into the right places and can have a much more better society. Thank you so much. I learned a lot. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, our host. I think we come to an end at this point. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody joining on Zoom and Facebook.
Yeah.
Bye. Have a good day.
Bye. Have a good one. Yeah. Okay.